It's the Paradise Podcast.
I am your host, Ryan Michelle Bethay, with my husband, Sterling.
What's up?
Join us here on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus, where we'll discuss each episode with the cast and crew of Paradise. I'll be getting all the secrets from Dan Fogelman, James Marsden, Shailene Woodley, Julianne Nicholson, and Sterling Kelby Brown. Woo! Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming.
And stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptations. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. This will be my Outlander Season 8, Episode 5 review titled Send for the Devil. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the book or the TV show, please do keep on scrolling. So Episode 5 starts with Claire and Jamie harvesting honey from the bees at the big house, and we hear Jamie call it ambrosia, which means the food or drink of the Greek gods, and implying that their honey tastes delicious. Claire asks Jamie if he has anything he would like to tell the bees, and we get a more of a contextual line where Claire reminds the viewer that they're alone because Brianna and Roger left them to go to Savannah, and everyone is away from the big house except for Buck, who can be seen playing with the kids in the grass. Jamie and Claire talk about the fact that the bees haven't said much to Claire herself since she started talking to them, and this is foreshadowing again for her continuing to talk to them just like she does in the 9th book. Jamie also tells Claire that Buck promised to fight alongside him at the Battle of King's Mountain, which means that Jamie has told him about the battle. And for Jamie, because he knows that he's a time traveler, there's no point in keeping that information from him. Buck being in this time is show canon only. This doesn't happen in the books. And so they also have to then come up with a way to address the fact that Jamie killed Buck's father and Claire killed Buck's mother. So the two of them decide that that is something they're going to keep from him because he doesn't need to know that they are responsible for his parents' deaths. Having Buck be in this time is a show canon change that I actually think works well here. We already had a lot of ground laid establishing that he's very close to Brianna and Roger's children and feels protective over them. And I think having him play a role in this particular episode too, he's an easy character to kind of plug in. And the actor who played him really impressed me last season when we first saw him show up on our screens. So I was happy that he was included in this plot again. While he's playing with the children, we can hear a twig break in the woods, and he turns around and tells the kids to run to the house. And that's when he starts to walk towards the edge of the woods to see what is approaching them. Buck so seamlessly falls into this secondary role of defending the house, just like Jamie. You can totally tell that they are cut from the same cloth here. And Jamie can tell from Buck's behavior, even at a distance, that something is wrong. So we see him coming up behind Buck, and that's when Whittaker emerges from the woods and warns Jamie that Cunningham is coming for him. So in this very quick intro, we already are laying the foundation of who's currently at the Ridge and what the main issue in this episode is going to be, which is the threat of Cunningham. That's when we get the title card, which is a shot of this drummer boy at the rebel camp where Roger was left in the last episode, with the drums signaling that the battle is beginning. This is foreshadowing to the events of the episode, but also for a character that Roger is going to be interacting with in this episode as well. At the big house, we continue the conversation with Whittaker, who explains to Jamie that he and some of his men were hunting with the Cherokee, and this is a change from the book where the character's name is Cloudtree and is a Native American himself. In the book version, he hears Cunningham at the Cherokee villages where he's been trading. But in the show, Whittaker says that he overhears some white men talking about the Cherokee joining a loyalist militia that Cunningham is putting together, and that one of the men said Cunningham would soon be in charge of Fraser's Ridge. This is when Whittaker mentions the name Ferguson again, and this gives Jamie pause because Ferguson has been arresting rebels, raising militias, and Cunningham means to attack Jamie and bring him to Ferguson as an example to the other rebels. And in the book, Cunningham actually got tired of waiting to hear back from Ferguson about Jamie after he invited him to the Ridge to take care of Jamie, and so instead he decided he was going to arrest Jamie himself and bring him to Ferguson directly. In the book, this is when Jamie asks Cloudtree about a man named Scotchy Cameron, or Alexander Cameron, but in the show they've omitted his character and his involvement in this plan that Jamie comes up with in order to defend himself from Cunningham. In the show, Jamie asks Whittaker when this attack is going to happen, and Whittaker tells him that all they said was in a few days, because Cunningham is waiting on a man named Partland, who is coming from a settlement of 96 with his own militia in order to help him. Jamie then tells Whittaker he owes him a service and he will not forget his help, but Whittaker says he's actually the one that owes them for what Claire did for his family. And he's worried that if anyone were to find out that he had helped Jamie, that his family would be in danger. And so Jamie promises him that no one will find out that Whittaker had warned him. Back in Savannah with Amaranthus and Trevor, we can see that Bree is painting them in the study when William arrives into the room. Interestingly, William enters this room and approaches with a very knowing smile on his face. And this is the first time we get a insight into Bree's mental state because we can see her nervous about the sound of cannon fire. Bree asks William what he thinks about the painting so far, and we get a close-up of the portrait that Brianna has been working on before Amaranthus and Trevor leave the room. William's reaction to Amaranthus is all Bree needs in order to bring up that she knows he has a crush on her, and William tells her that she doesn't need to keep painting if she is worried about her husband, and changes the topic of conversation. For Brianna, it's a worthwhile distraction, and so instead she asks William if he was able to spend any time with Jamie after he found out that Jamie was his father. A big part of Brianna being in Savannah is her being able to talk to William and help give him a little bit more direction and also aid in him coming to terms with the fact that Jamie is his father. And that's something that both she and Lord John understand, is that she's the only person that's going to be able to connect to him on that level. So when she asks William if he was able to spend any time with Jamie, it's a pointed question. She's trying to find a point of entry to get him to open up about his feelings so that she can share her own and let him know that he's not having this singular experience. William then tells Bree about the time that Jamie helped him look for Jane. And Bree knows about Jane, so she says as much. And William admits he never told Jane just how much she meant to him. And that's when Brianna starts to open up to him directly and talk about her experience of finding out that Jamie was her father. She tells him she was 19 when she found out about Jamie, but didn't meet him until years afterwards. And she already had a father who she loved and idolized, but by the time she learned that Jamie was her dad, Frank had already died, which made it worse somehow because it felt like everyone in her life had lied to her for her entire life, including her mother, and she was never able to rectify those feelings with Frank either. She was so angry, she made a cutting remark that she wished it was Claire instead of her dad who had passed away. And you can see William relating to that experience so deeply, and he asks her how she ever was able to get over it. And she says that she got to know Jamie, and that is kind of what allowed her to come to terms with everything about herself. And it seems like William doesn't like that answer, but he accepts it all the same. In the book, there's so many instances where I found William to be behaving in a very bratty manner, and the few scenes that I found him most redeemable were the ones where he was conversing with Bree. And so I'm glad that the show is giving these scenes room to breathe and really establish that they have so much in common and are going to be able to find that commonality in so many areas of their lives as soon as William comes into the fold of the family. And Bree is really the one extending that olive branch and approaching him about it in a way that doesn't incite anger in him every time they talk about the situation. Back at the big house, Whittaker leaves, and Jamie, Claire, and Buck are starting to come up with a plan. And Jamie acknowledges that he knows Cunningham will not attack him at the house. He would have learned about how everything went down with the Brown family. What I loved about this scene is how much it highlights Jamie's ability to think bigger. And we can see that he knows that Cunningham will wait for him to be somewhere exposed and pulls together his thoughts to decide that it would be at Lodge. And while both Claire and Buck are approaching this as an immediate need to solve the problem and get rid of Cunningham quickly, Jamie knows that there's repercussions to that, and he has to play the game as though it's much bigger than Cunningham. Buck wanting to just eliminate the problem right away is very akin to how his father would have reacted in this situation. Jamie's biggest concern is learning who amongst him is a follower of Cunningham's, because taking out Cunningham won't stop his followers from trying to go after Jamie after. And Jamie is also worried about this militia from the 96, and he knows that he has to cut it off. So because Jamie's own militia is untrained and unprepared, he has to make a deal with the devil, which is the title card of the episode. That's when we see Jamie hand Josiah a letter, and we are left in suspense wondering who.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's Omni-Shade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities, so do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So after Jamie announces that he has to make a deal with the devil, we see him hand Josiah a letter, and we are left waiting and wondering what Jamie's plan entails and if this letter will get to its recipient in time. And that is where the show cuts over to Roger, and he is still at the Continental camp preparing for the battle. The show then uses a voiceover in order to catch us up with what's going on in his world right now. He is handed his sword to fight with, and even though they have watered down Roger's character quite a lot so far in this season, they're trying to make it seem like this battle and his involvement is a very big plot point, even though it doesn't really amount to anything. My critique of the voiceover is that it sounds incredibly rehearsed. And so we walk through the days of Roger preparing to fight while he writes out this letter that he intends to send to Bree. And so the voiceover being overlaid on screen is the contents of that letter. We see him in his uniform amongst the men, feeling the camaraderie that they are all experiencing and the nervous energy that would come from preparing for battle. And at the end of that monologue, we hear him say, Christ let him live through this battle, and warns that if he doesn't, he'll have Bree to answer to. This uptight shot of Roger holding the letter up to his forehead and the voiceover technique that they use is very similar to how it's done in Blood of My Blood with Claire's parents and their letters that they wrote back and forth to one another. And I think this joke about God having Bree to answer to would hit harder if Bree was closer to the version of her in the books, because she's far more intimidating, I find, in the books than the show version of her, which is much softer and less intimidating than I think most book readers would describe her being. That's when the drums begin and Roger starts to watch the men grab their guns, and we start to see the young boys that are scared of battle, including this young drummer, who again is presumably the man or the boy in the title card from the top of the episode. That's when we see Roger approach him and give him encouragement that God is with them. And we hear the boy speaking French. And that's when Roger speaks French back to him, and we hear the line, Je suis prêt, which is an omen because that's the Fraser motto. The use of I am ready is another narrative callback to season 1 when we heard Jamie announce that that's the Fraser motto to Claire. We also can think of so many times prior to battle when mentally the Frasers are talking themselves up and trying to convince themselves that they're ready. And for Roger to hear that would probably help him calm his own nerves, even though he's trying to offer that support to this young boy. Back in Savannah, the cannons continue to go off, and Bree is sitting at the table, unable to eat. And that's when William comes in and approaches her and confirms that the sound is not coming from the ships anymore. The battle, he knows, has begun, and he doesn't agree with the choice to attack by the marshes. So again, it's an insight into the fact that William, even though he's not serving in the army right now, is very clever in terms of strategy and understands what is actually going to be happening out on the front lines. And it's then that he asks why Roger was out of town, and Bree finally admits that he is at the Continental camp. William tells Bree that Lord John is at headquarters, but had asked William to give Brianna a flag to hang in the window so that if the Continentals were to come into the city, they would know that Brianna is on their side and that she would be kept safe in their home while he is away. I've always found the very quiet way that Lord John lets Brianna know how much she means to him is one of my favorite bits of writing in the book series. I think that Bree in the book, again, is depicted so differently, but I do think that the show has done a good job of maintaining the fact that the two of them are so close and that Lord John feels so strongly about her and puts her in such high regard alongside William, especially given the fact that they are siblings. I think the argument can always be made that Brianna reminds Lord John of Jamie and that is in part why he cares for her so deeply. But I also think that he has come to know Brianna as her own woman and can identify parts of her that are also very clear. And as her own person separate from her parents, he has found a kinship in her that I think is really beautiful. Back at the battle, we see Roger running through the woods as the men are retreating, and that's when he spots the young boy that he went into the battle with originally. But first, he starts to see men who are dying, witness the horrors of this battle, and amongst those men, he finds a man leaning against a tree and hears his final words and is able to provide him comfort in his final moments. This moment, I think, is the most effective way to showcase why Roger felt called to be there in the moment and how he was useful at this time, because he's not holding a gun. He's not actively fighting in the battle, but he's providing comfort to the men who are not going to make it home to their loved ones. And I think that he finds great purpose in that, and more purpose still when he carries the young boy back to the camp and puts him in the hands of a doctor. This is when we see Denzel Hunter back on our screens again, and I was so happy to see him because he's such an underrated character, and I also love the actor who plays him. I think he's done a really great job of taking someone who doesn't have a lot of screen time and making him very impactful when he is on our screen. You can see when he's at work how similar he is to Claire and why the two of them would have found such a strong connection in one another. And him being on screen in this high stakes situation and being able to be that calm presence is just so nice to see, especially when he interacts with Roger, because Roger is frantically trying to make sure that this boy is going to live. And he doesn't realize that he's talking to Rachel's brother. His interaction with Denzel is the first of a few connections being drawn in this episode, but I noticed that he starts speaking French with the young boy, and I can't remember when Roger could speak French. I don't know if that's book canon. I couldn't find it in my research of the books, but it felt like this sudden announcement that Roger spoke fluent French. When Denzel is able to successfully remove the bullet, that's when Roger decides to run back into the action in order to find more men, and when he's on his way up the hill, that's when there is an explosion in front of him. And the show once again uses it to circle back to the novella A Leaf on the Wind of All Hallows and Roger's connection with his parents and the moment that the tube station collapsed in London when he was a young boy and his father was able to save him. So not only is this little clip able to tie us back to last season and the scenes that we saw between Roger and his own father, but it puts it back in the forefront of our minds so that we can start thinking about the time loop theory that Roger's going to bring up later on with Brianna. Back on the ridge, we can see Lizzie standing above the trading post on the hill beside the lodge, and We see her with this basket full of flowers and then reaching under her skirts to hide something beneath a log there. And when we see her strategically leave the basket of flowers, that tips us off to know that she's also part of this grand plan that Jamie has put together alongside Josiah and Kessie. Her family has always been loyal to the Frasers, so it's nice to see that all of them are involved in protecting the Ridge in this way. Back in the big house, Jamie and Claire are both preparing for the night ahead, and through their dialogue, they tell us that the grandchildren have been sent away in order to be kept safe. Claire tells Jamie she knows where the weapons are since she's going to be at the house alone, but Jamie really doesn't feel like Cunningham would ever come to the house or go after her at the house itself. That's when he turns and asks Claire how he looks, and she says you'd scare the devil himself. This definitely feels like a callback to season 5 when Jamie comes around the corner in his kilt preparing for the battle, and Jamie tells Claire he doesn't want to scare the devil. Tonight he needs the devil on his side. He hasn't heard from Josiah yet, so he's going into this plan somewhat blindly, and Claire reiterates that she doesn't want Jamie to go, but Jamie promises her that he's going to execute the plan regardless of Josiah, and refers to Best Laid Schemes, which is a nod to season 2, episode 6. He reminds Claire that Cunningham doesn't want him dead, only captured, and this reference to Best Laid Schemes isn't exactly a great omen considering that in the episode it's referring back to, in season 2, Jamie went back on his word to Claire and fought Blackjack Randall, and that led to Claire losing faith. If Jamie's plan fails, he vows he'll fight tooth and nail, every man with him, and the music here is very similar to season 1 when Jamie goes off to Preston Pans. And that's when we hear Claire ask, "It will not be today, will it?" And Jamie kisses her knuckles like he always does and says, "I didn't think so, Claire, but I will not lie to you. I think it will be an evil night." It's a great use of dialogue pulled directly from chapter 108 in Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, and a perfect segue into the following scene. Jamie and his Ardsmuir men head to Lodge, and we can see him spot the basket of flowers that Lizzie left there, take a deep breath, and walk into the building knowing what is to come. Thankfully, Jamie knows that he has a handful of men who are going to have his back in this situation. They've all been briefed on the plan, and now all they have to do is execute it and hope that Cunningham doesn't act out of character for what Jamie has assessed within him. When we see Cunningham, he is talking to Hiram Crombie, and again, this is foreshadowing for the changes that they're making to Hiram Crombie's character and how he's associated with Cunningham himself in the show version of this story. And that's when we see Cunningham finally approach Jamie, and that's when Jamie asks, "Shall we begin?" And I really loved the characterization of Cunningham here. The actor who plays him has done a great job making him seem very villainous under the surface, but shady, shifty. We're not able to really understand what he's going to do next, and he carries himself in a way that made him, I find, very compelling as a character to watch on screen. Back at the big house, Claire is setting up her surgery, and the nerves are evident on her face. And as she lays out all her tools and prepares for everything, we see her taking a drink of whiskey and watching out the window. That's when both us as viewers and Claire look out the window and spot Elspeth Cunningham approaching the house. And the two of them are in the same boat, awaiting the fate of the men in their lives. And this scene with her and Elspeth, and also the scene in Lodge, are taken almost directly from the source material, including the dialogue. Inside Lodge, Jamie starts to lead the conversation and Hiram Crombie begins. And the way that they shot this is so brilliant because we get a very clear sense of who's in that room and how Jamie is scanning it throughout this entire meeting. This wide-angle shot is really brilliant because it makes us feel like we are truly in the room because we can see all three walls around Jamie. We're also up and above him, looking over his shoulder, so it replicates how he must feel standing in front of all of these men, and it allows us to see the faces of everybody in that room and scan them just like Jamie is. Hiram Crombie mentions a neighbor needing help, and Jamie is taking the opportunity while he's speaking to watch the men closely and notes that Cunningham is talking to the man beside him and that another one of them leaves the lodge out the door. And this is how Jamie starts to piece together who among him is loyal to Cunningham and not to him. As he's thinking through this, the next man, McClure, stands up and says he's having a dispute with his neighbor, a man named John Coyne, over well water, and that he'd like someone to go with him to talk to him. Jamie immediately says he will go, but McClure points out that Jamie is his friend, so he'd like someone on his side too. And that opens up the window for Cunningham to offer his help and says that he's free tomorrow at noon because he has, quote, no other plans. The look on Jamie's face here is so smart because you can tell that he's happy almost in a way to know he's lying ahead of time and have the upper hand here because Cunningham so seamlessly lies to everybody in this room, and Jamie knows that beneath that facade he is a total and complete snake. Back at the big house, Claire offers Elspeth a drink, and Elspeth tells Claire she had to come. And that's when Claire tells her pretty candidly that they already know about Cunningham's plan. And for Elspeth, I think that comes as a shock. But then I also think in the back of her mind, she must have known that Claire and Jamie would have someone on their side here protecting them in this way. And so she offers Claire the knowledge that he won't hurt Jamie unless he has to, and that she's aware that Cunningham would do the same. She offers that the two of them could pray together over the situation, and Claire pretty candidly points out that there are no prayers suitable for the occasion. And I love this scene between her and Elspeth, and I really enjoy all the scenes in the book and the show between the two of them. I think this actress did a wonderful job conveying this character and giving her a lot of depth. Back at Lodge, Cunningham stands and starts to speak on loyalty and brings up being loyal to the crown, king, and country. And this is immediately what sets Jamie off, to the point where it comes across as Cunningham specifically egging him on for this reason. This is one of the highlights of the episode, and it's pulled directly from the source material. When Jamie confronts him and asks what brings this to mind, Cunningham points out that he knows they're not supposed to bring politics into Lodge, and that's when Jamie overrides him and says, "I will say but one thing, dear friend." And he says that in Gaelic. And this dialogue is so beautifully written. It says, "This is not my own, but a thing said by our forefathers some 400 years ago. As long as but 100 of us remain alive, never shall we, under any conditions, be brought under English rules." And then Jamie points out that they are fighting for freedom alone, and no honest man gives that up, but with life itself. And all of the delivery of this is so impactful, especially when he looks Cunningham directly in the eyes as he's delivering these lines and quoting this oath, basically, that Cunningham adheres to. And the look on his face is just perfect because he's void of all emotion in his eyes, and you can tell that he's just met his match in Jamie totally, and that makes Jamie even more of a threat than he had felt he was before. And it's at that moment that Jamie decides to close Lodge with a prayer, and Hiram Crombie realizes that something's going on here. And again, that foreshadows what they're going to do with his character in this storyline. And it's while everyone has their heads bowed that Jamie leaves. And I loved how we can see that all of the men who are in on it with Jamie lean into this plan so heavily and allow him the opportunity to escape. We watch him slip out the back door quietly and undetected, and we get this beautiful uptight shot of Cunningham's face when he opens his eyes, looks up, and realizes that Jamie knows what's going on. And that's when we hear him say, "God damn it," leave with his men out of the lodge and run after Jamie looking for him. By that point, Jamie has collected the pistol that Lizzie had left for him under that log. We get more confirmation of who is on Cunningham's side as they all exit Lodge together, and Jamie is cataloging the men's faces and names. And that's when we see him run into the woods and meet up with Kezzy and Buck, who are waiting for him. When Jamie and the rest of the men get to their meeting point in the woods, they all hash out who's a traitor. And Jamie tells the men that Cunningham wants him alive, and he will not be the one who brings death here tonight. But for him, anyone in the woods is a traitor to him and the Ridge. And so the men are acting in accordance to how Jamie wants to handle this plan, which is not to have anyone get killed for no reason, especially since this fight is primarily between him and Cunningham. Then we watch all the men disperse to their decided locations, and we still are not clear if Josiah was able to successfully deliver the letter that Jamie had sent. As night falls, we can see that there's a storm coming in the direction of the Ridge. And Claire and Elspeth are still sitting by the fire waiting for news of what's happened. Elspeth asks where the children are, and Claire tells her that the kids are away, but Fanny is asleep upstairs. And I was confused as to why Fanny wouldn't have been sent away with the children too, but she does help Claire in the surgery when they come back, so presumably that is why. And that's when Elspeth says 5 more years and admits to Claire that she believes in Cunningham's prophecy that he will see his son in 7 years. But to her, that doesn't mean that he will kill Claire's husband. It only means that Jamie will not kill him. That's when Claire bites off that must be a comfort to Elspeth. And Elspeth tries to justify the fact that Cunningham only wants to bring Jamie to Ferguson, but Claire is very quick to remind her that he's being brought there to be hanged for the sake of Cunningham's own advancement. Elspeth says it's for the sake of his king, his honor, and as an officer of that king, and says that Jamie earned his own execution by betraying the same king. But then she backpedals because I think at the core of everything, the two of these women identify that they love these people and war is ugly and it's leading to very ugly things. And sometimes the way that you rationalize things like this is very irrational. So Elspeth backpedals and says, "We were going to pray, weren't we?" That's when we see Hiram Crombie, and he's armed walking around in front of the trading post when Jamie approaches him from behind and knocks him unconscious. The show makes Hiram Crombie a obvious traitor and uses him as an example later on in this episode. In the book, he's not on the list of men who Jamie orders to leave the ridge. But that's when Jamie enters into the trading post and finds Cunningham's office empty, and Cunningham appears behind him then, asking to talk. He disarms himself, Jamie tells him to leave his land on foot or in a box, and Cunningham truly feels like he is immune to death. This prophecy is driving him to make very irrational decisions. He says that he has a box waiting for him in 5 years' time, and that's when he instead pulls a knife. And once again, I think the performance here for Captain Cunningham's character is just so unhinged and wonderfully done. And that's when the fight between these two men ensues. One thing about this scene between Jamie and Cunningham is that the book does not drop us into the scene as it's happening in real time. We actually learn about what happened during the fight later on, and Jamie is retelling it to Claire. So for the purposes of the show, they were able to kind of reconstruct what happens in this fight scene and make it work for the set pieces that they had in the show. It makes for a big climactic moment in the episode, sure, because we can see these two men fighting in hand-to-hand combat. Naturally, the implication is going to be that Jamie is the stronger of these two men, but we see that Cunningham actually gets him in a precarious situation quite a few times over the course of this fight, especially when he wounds Jamie in his chest. The choreography of this fight scene was pretty well executed because it has so many different layers to it. We see them using rope. We see them reaching for weapons. We see them knocking weapons out of each other's hands, punching each other. And Cunningham actually gets the upper hand a few times on Jamie, especially with his weapon being knocked outside of this trading post and into the dirt. It's at that point that Cunningham points it at him, and Jamie is unarmed, and we start to wonder how this is going to end. But of course, if you've read the book, you knew what was coming. Cunningham ends up having a few choice words for Jamie, which buys other people time to come to Jamie's defense. The main thing is that he wants to know how Jamie knew that he was going to go after him. And Jamie simply says that it's his ridge and it's his job to know. And that's when Cunningham admits that his plans are changing, and he'd be okay with bringing Jamie to Ferguson, dead or alive. This is the look of a man unhinged. This is a look of a man who has lost his way, and he thinks he's acting in a way that is in service of king and country, and I think at this point it's largely just to prove to himself, out of his hatred or jealousy of Jamie, that he can follow through on this promise that he's made to himself to deliver him to Ferguson. Especially when you think about the line that he never wanted it to come to this. And I think that that's proof that in some small way, Jamie was holding a mirror up to his failings as a person, and that every point when he thought he was the smartest person in a room, Jamie was able to outwit him and beat him to the punch. And that's something that Jamie as a character has always done. He's very clever, he's very observant, and that has always been to his benefit. This is the moment when he pulls the gun and Cunningham is actually shot in the back by Buck Mackenzie, which Jamie obviously was not expecting, and you can see that surprise on his face. This is a show-only change because, again, Buck is not in this time in the main story of the book canon, and the book never shows us this fight or what happened. So they're filling in the blanks here with the Buck storyline. I also think that subtly it's implying the fact that Jamie killed Buck's father, and now Buck is saving Jamie. It creates this kind of interesting redemptive arc.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Back at Lord John's, William approaches Bree and tells her that John has written to the Continental camp, and she knows the battle is now over, but she's still waiting to see what's happening. So she wants to go to the camp because she can't keep waiting for news. The one thing about this sort of storytelling that frustrates me is that in the book, you're jumping between characters quite often, so it doesn't feel like one character is sort of suspended in time in the same way that a TV show makes it feel. Like it seems like Bree has been standing in this window or sitting at this table for days because we're only dropping into scenes when she's looking out the window. And so it makes it feel like she hasn't had anything to do the entire time she's been in Savannah. And that can be difficult for an actor because you're supposed to be conveying that this character has been sitting in this feeling for days or weeks and we don't even know how long it's been. But in reality, in the show, when you're watching it, it feels like this has all been happening in one day and she's just been standing in front of this window. William actually offers to join her at first light and go to the Continental camp with her. And while at first on the surface it seems like he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart and wanting to help with Bree, we also will learn that it's in part because he's still trying to find out more information about his cousin, Ben. I do think, though, that this is a gesture made out of the goodness of his heart and his loyalty to Bree, and that in some small way, through their conversations with one another, his heart has been opened up to her in ways that are going to become more impactful later on, and he trusts her. Back at the big house, Claire and Elspeth have been waiting all night, waiting for news in this big thunder and lightning storm. And Claire hears the back door opening to her surgery. And I love this shot where we follow behind her with the camera into the surgery. It's like we're being able to see through her eyes in real time and wondering who is being carried into the surgery. And that's when Claire discovers that it's Cunningham and that he has been shot in the back. Jamie then appears, and we can tell that he's still laboring over the cut on his pectoral muscle. And I love this confrontation with Elspeth because she immediately says, "He had no intentions of killing you." And Jamie fires back and says, "You can ask your son what his intentions were." Claire immediately jumps into action, and her and Elspeth and all the other men in the room work together for her to diagnose Cunningham, and she suspects that he's been hit by this bullet in a part of his lumbar that is going to leave him paralyzed. You can kind of see that suspicion on her face, and she confirms it when she asks him to wiggle his fingers and toes, and he cannot move his feet. All of the lines that they give to Fanny in this scene are taken directly out of the source material, and I love how they have her in the book and in the show fall so effortlessly into this role as being Claire's right hand in command and knowing what to do ahead of time. So you can tell through these simple lines of dialogue that the two of them have built up a rapport with one another, and Fanny's been paying attention. She knows exactly what to do before Claire has to tell her to do it. Elspeth then asks point blank if he will live, and Claire says she thinks so, but admits that he may not walk. It may heal because it didn't go all the way through, but it also might not. And so she asks Elspeth to stay with her because she'll need her help, and we watch her remove the bullet. Back in Savannah, we see Amaranthus sitting outside and William approaching from behind. She can sense him before he even reaches her, and she greets him with a smile on her face because it's nice to see him after such a busy day. And we can see her laying it on pretty thick, saying that she wants to see him in her waistcoat again. And the two of them start to be a little bit more candid with their attraction towards one another. Specifically William, who tries to make a clever joke by saying he's developed a particular species of feelings for her. I do think that it's fun to see William, who is Jamie's offspring, and Jamie is so good with his words, stumble over them a bit and be a little awkward. And thankfully, Amaranthus finds it amusing. She finds it charming. But this moment has offered William a window to address feelings that I think he's been struggling with for a while now. And he points out that you can lose people so quickly during a war, as evidenced by her losing Ben. And so he doesn't want things to remain unsaid between them. And it would make sense that he's feeling this way because he's about to go into this continental camp in the morning with Brianna, and he's been watching Brianna worry about her own husband for days. He tells her that he's been considering her suggestion that they get married, and if they had a son, they could give his title to that son. And Amaranthus is strategic, especially in the book. I think they've softened her character a little bit in the show. They've made her arguably a little more likable. You can see that she does have an affection for William that's probably more rooted in reality than I read Amaranthus's character in the book. She says she wasn't jesting, but also points out that they needn't get married straight away. They could give it a go anyways, and maybe just enjoy the try if the result does not end in a child. And that's when the two of them share their first kiss with one another. But this is when you can see that Amaranthus understands the power she holds, because William says it cannot be like this, and then she encourages him further. And when he says we'll get married, it's just like in the book, and I wanted to smack William upside the head. Because Amaranthus takes total advantage of the situation, and they aren't married, and so if something were to come to pass between them, he's now on the hook for it, and he knows that, but he's not willing to say no in the moment. That's when we go back to the Continental camp the next day. We see Roger praying over the bodies of the soldiers that they lost in this battle, and then Bree and him make eye contact through the tent and reunite with one another. This is the hug that we saw in the trailer. We can see Roger holding the Bible in his hand. The two of them share an emotional reunion kiss once again. Bree shoves him and expresses that she's mad at him for scaring her. And that is when they are approached by Denzel Hunter. And Roger explains to Bree that he had just discovered this morning that Denzel is Rachel's brother. So we get the first of the new introductions out of the way. And then quickly, William enters the fold. He reunites with Denzel, who we know he's met before. And this time it's Roger who is surprised to finally meet William for the first time. As we watch this reunion happen between Roger and Bree, Denzel and William, and then all of them collectively learning who each other is to one another in this interconnected world, the one thing I wished we had was just a little bit more breathing room in this moment, because when characters like these finally get to meet, there's so much that has been unsaid or is left off the page. And I think the show had the opportunity to even just give a witty one-liner between William and Roger, something of them interacting, but we don't get that in this scene, and I was left wanting more. Instead, all we get is this knowing look between Roger and Bree, and to be honest, I think that's undercutting the importance of William and Bree connecting in this story. I feel like Bree would want to have Roger meet her sibling. That's a big deal. And so being omitted that scene felt like we were missing something. But because of that, we're able to spend more time with this reworked moment between Denzel and William from the source material. Bree then makes the joke that for a loyalist, William has a lot of rebel friends, which again is going to become important as the story goes on. I don't know how much, given that we only have a few episodes left in the season to close out the story, but at least in the book canon, it is important to note. And he tells Bree and Roger he'd like to stay a while to catch up with Denzel, which for the storyline would make sense if Denzel was married to his cousin Dottie, like he is in the book, but instead they seem to have written her out of the show. And so he tells Bree, go back to Savannah, rest up at Lord John's house. His letter will still grant her and Roger safe passage, where they can get cleaned up before they head back to the Ridge. And this is when William asks Denzel about Rachel. And it's our first clue into the fact that he is still hung up on her in some small way. Denzel's able to tell William that she's had a baby and she's very happy. And that despite any of the problems that William had with Ian, William's able to admit that he's very happy for them. Keep in mind that the night before, he had been fooling around with Amaranthus. So this man has woman problems up the wazoo. But having Denzel confirm that he and Rachel have been corresponding with one another this whole time is a nice little way to loop their storyline back together, because Denzel hasn't been on our screens much this season. As Denzel enters into this tent, we can see that William is afforded this private moment with himself where he's smiling, and I have to assume he's reflecting on the fact that he has someone to be excited about now in Amaranthus. And I really do enjoy this uptight shot of his face because it feels like we've seen Jamie in this position and posturing so many times before. It's definitely meant to be some sort of a visual callback to us looking at Jamie when he's smiling to himself, thinking about Claire. And that's when he sees Denzel come out of the tent and hears the voice of Ben. And this amazing shot of his face and the just disbelief on it, I really loved how it was captured. And Charles Van der Vaart did an excellent job in this entire moment for me. Ben, on the other hand, is displeased to see William, to say the least. The two of them are in this sort of standoff in the middle of a Continental Army camp. And so Ben immediately knows that he has to pull this into the tent, into the privacy of the tent, so that things don't get out of hand. Denzel is none the wiser, so he offers an introduction to William, and the two of them play it off as if they are old friends. For 1 second, you get to see William relieved at the fact that his cousin is still alive, before it's dawned on him that his cousin is still alive and is in a Continental camp serving as a general. When they get inside the tent, you can tell that Ben doesn't understand how this is happening. William, on one hand, is thrilled to death to see that he is not, in fact, dead and that his suspicions were correct. And they're able to share this very nice hug with one another before the realization dawns on both of them, and William in particular, because in a matter of seconds, he resolves himself to punch Ben in the face. Again, there's a few changes to this storyline as we compare it to the source material. In the book, when William comes across Denzel, he asks if Miss Hunter is around, and originally means Rachel, and he's surprised to find his cousin, Dottie, who is married to Denzel Hunter in the books, and that's when he runs into Ben shortly after. So they've, again, eliminated the character of Dottie here. And Dottie is Ben's sister, so again, she would have been in on this secret too. For a character like William, who we've already at the top of the episode learned just how deeply affected he is by being lied to about his parentage, this is just another blow to him, to know that he's been lied to by his cousin and someone that he looked up to and idolizes. Back at the big house, Jamie and his men are drinking inside the house while Claire is tending to Jamie's chest wound. And this is a direct visual callback to the very first episode of Outlander when Claire was tending to Jamie's shoulder. Jamie admits to her that he really thought he was done for until he heard Buck's gunfire, and Claire asks about Cunningham's other men. That's when Buck enters into the room and tells Claire that they all ran away deprived of their weapons and were sent home feeling less brave about themselves. That's when Jamie asks for paper because he wants to write down the names of the men, and he starts to list them off from memory, and Claire asks why he needs to write them down, and he says it's so that she can get rid of them if something were to ever happen to Jamie. All of the names that Jamie lists off in this scene are taken from the source material, which makes it a fun little Easter egg game, but the addition of Hiram Crombie is new, and that is show canon only. It's in that moment that the men who are inside the big house with Jamie, Claire, and Buck hear and see men approaching the house on horseback. And so everybody arms up and heads outside to investigate, because at this point they're still not sure if this could be any of Cunningham's men coming to avenge him. This shot of Jamie looking out the window is very similar to when the house was under siege in season 7. So they really love this kind of shadowy shot of his face looking out the window. And this particular shot is from the trailer. So again, it is akin to when the Browns were attacking their house again. So for a moment as a viewer, you're wondering if this is another group of people coming once again to take Jamie or attack the house, because you don't know if Cunningham's plan involved other people, if this is the militia he was sending after. If you read the book, you know, but as a viewer, you're left in this sort of suspense. And we see Jamie and Claire exiting the house armed with all of the men around them. And that is when we finally lay eyes on Josiah, who approaches on horseback with all of these men and calls out, "Hello, the house." Jamie, of course, is relieved to see him, but naturally it would seem like he's a little too late. That's when he starts to explain to Jamie and Claire that they did manage to find the militiamen and take care of them before they ever reached the ridge. It's at that point that we see and hear Cleveland, who tells Jamie that he took care of the men, he won't have to worry about them again, and we know that he handled it in a way that Jamie is in direct opposition of, because we saw Jamie tell his men that he does not want death to befall the Ridge tonight. And Cleveland, although he wasn't acting in Jamie's service, is still now associated with Jamie. And it sounds like he was pretty malicious with how he treated this 96. This particular shot I really liked because the makeup artists in the show, I don't think they get enough credit. You can see the line around Jamie's neck from where the rope would have been. Everything about how they do these very subtle makeup decisions to make these people look like they're of this time is so wonderfully done that you don't even notice it right away. So I wanted to call that out because I think that's important to note. And Cleveland once again starts peacocking. And I think by now, if you don't know his character from the book, you can tell that he very much feels like Jamie is indebted to him and has been the whole way through. And it's just taking Jamie a lot longer than Cleveland wants it to for him to realize that he's in the right and Jamie can't keep operating from the same moral high ground that he appears to be. But Jamie has clearly thought this through. That's why he sent the letter. He knew he was gambling, taking a chance, associating himself with Cleveland, but he was desperate. And so desperate times call for desperate measures. He doesn't trust this man. We can see that Buck listens to Cleveland talk and also doesn't trust this man. He's a loose cannon. He's not to be trusted. And Jamie knows that, but Jamie also knows that it's better to keep your enemy close. And at this point, he needs his enemies as close as possible. And Cunningham is inside his house. He invites Cleveland inside to talk. And that's when Claire says to him, "Send for the devil," and the devil appears. And that's when we see Jamie ordering his men to stand down. Everyone re-enters the house, and we assume they're coming up with the next stage of the plan because Ferguson is still a very real threat looming over all of their heads.